There are some investigators that think that the I-65 killer is also responsible for the I-70 killings. Well, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more in this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Yep, it's what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals interviewed and participating in this show, and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster or Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to another Charlie Crimebuster podcast. Hey, today we're going to talk about the I-65 killer, I-65 killer. That is a whole group of killings up and down the I-65 interstate. Last week we shared with you about the I-70 killer. Well, today we're going to talk about the I-65 killer. Now, what is interesting, some investigators and some crime sleuths, they actually feel that the same killer did all these murders. What do you think? We're going to let you decide after you hear all about it today. But first, every week we get new listeners, and I like to take the time to welcome you to the Charlie Crime family. Many thousands of downloads from our first podcast, and yet it always humbles me for new listeners every week. So if you're new, welcome. And if you're a regular listener, thank you. Yep, thank you for joining with us as we discuss crime from a cop's perspective. Now, I also urge you to reach out with a shout-out. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. You can make suggestions, you can ask questions, and you can even lodge objections. It's always a safe place for you to do that. In fact, it was from Janet, actually, from New Jersey, who made the suggestion to investigate the I-70 murders that brought us last week's podcast. And Janet, I want to thank you. I have been intrigued with this investigation. Hope you have as well. Wait a minute, we're going to get into the podcast, but first some housekeeping. If you'd like to support the podcast, go to peacemakernetwork.com. There you can become a badge, BADGE supporter for a few dollars a month. Hey, when you do that, you not only help us maintain the podcast, but your support helps us help the men and women of law enforcement, our first responders, and the brave people of the military. That, again, is peacemakernetwork.com. Now, I'm going to leave links in the show notes, so all you got to do is click on it. I'm also going to add another link, charliecrimebuster.com. That's where you can get caught up on this series. If you missed last week, you can go back and get caught up and be ready for the I-65 killer, or you can just hang on here and then check it out later. You can check out one, or you can binge a whole bunch of past podcasts. Again, that is charliecrimebuster.com, and that is going to be in the show notes. Now, because we always cover a lot of dark and violent material, we like to take the time to lighten the load. We do that by sharing a crazy crook story. Now, you would think we would run out of these stories, but just like the crazy Florida man stories, the crazy crook stories, they just keep on coming. And this crazy crook today is a woman. She probably will go down as the dumbest criminal ever. That was after she returned to the store she robbed, hang on to it, to demand her cell phone that she dropped. Yep, she was arrested for robbery after she returned to the store, minutes after sticking it up. She went back to retrieve the cell phone she dropped. Well, she was actually part of a duo who decided to rob a California nail supply store, initially making out with around, $600 worth of merchandise. Then one of the ladies, she decided to come back into the store minutes later, demanding her phone. She had apparently dropped it during the getaway. So after retrieving her phone, the two suspects, police identified them to Fox News Digital as Kaylee and Serene Banks, Kaylee Hall, Serene Banks. Kaylee was 24, Serene was 19. They left the scene in a black vehicle, and they were sitting outside their home, still in the car, an hour later when police contacted them. And get this, they are dumber and crazier and crazier. Reports say that all the merchandise was in plain sight, right there in the car, and waited there for an hour as the two women were arrested and then taken to jail. Yep, they were caught on the store's surveillance video during the robbery and the cell phone retrieval. The woman who came in demanded her cell phone. Well, she actually assaulted the store's owner. The store's owner wanted to trade her phone for the stolen merchandise. But in addition to robbing the place, well, the suspect threw the owner to the ground, and then she escaped with her phone. Now, Halls and Banks, well, they're no longer in custody. Yeah, imagine that. They posted their bail, which was $5,000 each. Sure, it's easy to get away with stuff today, isn't it, and get back out on the street. Well, for sure, it would have been easier. According to the police Facebook page, they said it would have been easier just to buy the products with a credit card that was in the phone case. Yeah, that's right. The department confirmed that when the suspect left her phone at the scene, that phone also contained in the case her ID, credit cards, and other personal items. Well, these crazy crooks never cease to amaze me. So this crazy crook, my friend, this crazy crook who decided to go back and get her cell phone that she dropped is indeed Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now, last week, I shared with you about the I-70 killer. I urged you to follow the victimology of the victims. That's the MO. That's what we call it in police speak. And if you missed last week, again, you can go to charliecrimebuster.com, click on the menu, then click on Charlie Shows. You can get caught up by listening to the I-70 Killer episode, or you can listen now and then go back and review. Now, the reason I'm asking you to pay close attention to both of these descriptions of these murders is that some people think, again, that the same killer of the I-70 murders is the same killer in the I-65 murders. I'm going to let you decide for yourself this time. It was in early morning hours of February the 21st, 1987. Now, this was before the I-70 killings, if you're keeping tabs on both. It was a cold morning, just about 36 degrees there in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Now, Elizabethtown is one of those small cities in Hardin County, Kentucky. You may or may not know that the town is actually the location of the boyhood home of President Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln. And, of course, it has great historical value along with the museums and his historical landmarks. It is also, they say, a great place for people who happen to love the outdoors. A lot of outdoor playgrounds for adults and children alike. Now, as you pass Louisville, Kentucky, heading south on I-65, you're going to find this little town just after you exit off and go down US 62. And just east of I-65, well, there was a new Days Inn, just a few feet from the I-65 North ramp. Now, past that inn was a large lot for semi-drivers, and there was also a small marathon truck stop. And past that, now was a second motel, only two at that time in the town. It was called the Super 8 Motel. Both motels would serve truckers and tourists. Now, along with the cold air, there was a light dusting of snow, and there was a young lady by the name of Vicky Heath. She was working the overnight shift at the Super 8 Motel. Now, 41-year-old Vicky had spent most of her life in Hardinsburg, Kentucky. She was at this time an empty nester, with her son and daughter just starting their adult lives. However, that nest wasn't totally empty, because Vicky had recently got engaged and was looking forward to the next chapter in her life. And to get a little extra cash planned for the wedding and other things, she took a job working nights at the Super 8 Motel right off of I-65 in Elizabethtown. Now, the manager there left Vicky at around 11 p.m. on Friday night. She shared with her that the motel was about half full, and the manager, he reported nothing out of the ordinary before he left Vicky that night for her to do her overnight shift. And at 6:38 the next morning, on Saturday morning, well, the Elizabethtown police, they received a call from a guest at the motel. That guest reported that they walked into the lobby to check out, and they found that the lobby was, quote, unquote, a complete mess. Also, even more troubling, they could not find the front clerk or anyone else who worked there. Now, upon arriving at the scene, the officer said it looked like there had been a brawl. He called for backup. Even the payphone had been torn from the wall. Remember now, this was 1987 when there was such thing as a payphone. Kind of normal it was. Well, the officer checked the upstairs and the first floor, and then he decided to go out the rear door to the back of the property. And unfortunately, he found a horrible sight. Behind the dumpster was the body of Vicky Heath. She was found lying on her back in the muddy grass that caused by the fresh melted snow. She still had on her sweater and a plaid skirt, but those clothes were tore up and mangled. She had also both blood and mud on her. It appeared that she had been shot in the head. Now the police followed the muddy footprints to the parking lot where they ended, and a fresh set of tire tracks started. Now the autopsy found that she had been robbed, beaten, sodomized, and shot twice in the head with a .38 handgun. A rape kit was used, and they did obtain, among other things, usable DNA. Now, DNA wasn't as advanced as it is today, but it was collected and it was stored. Now, you're probably thinking this doesn't sound a lot like the I-70 murders, but keep in mind this was before the I-70 murders, and there are such things as people's MO developing over the time and learning to get a little better at what they're doing. But I want to take you now 2 years to 1989. Now, don't be too quick to discount this and say, well, there's no way the same guy came back 2 years later. There's a lot more that connects these cases that we'll be telling you about. But on March the 3rd, 1989, there was a young lady by the name of Margaret Mary Gill. They affectionately called her Peggy. That's what she was called by those who knew her. And she was working as a night auditor at a local Days Inn. Yep, that's right, the local Days Inn. And as she was working there, let me tell you a little more about her. She was 24 years of age, Peggy was, and she was a student at the Sawyer Business College. She was the youngest of 4 children. She was described as very soft-spoken and shy. Now, Peggy was single, still living with her parents, and they said that she was a member of the Future Homemakers of America Club. She regularly competed in local baking contests. In fact, I found out in research that on the night before she went to work, she was finishing up touches on her birthday cake for her father. Her dad was turning 51 on March the 3rd. She had baked him his favorite cake. Now, before she went to work on that night, she did give her dad a hug, and she lovingly wished him, quote, unquote, early birthday, old man, affectionately, of course. Her dad was an inspector at the U.S. Steel, and sadly, did not know that when he told her, I love you, that would be his last time that he could do so on Earth. Now, this town is called Maryville. It's 40 miles, down from downtown Chicago. Has very popular real estate, largely due to Interstate 65 and US 30 intersecting there in downtown Maryville. Peggy arrived at the Maryville Days Inn to begin her shift shortly before 11 p.m. Now, the clerk that she relieved shared that it was a busy Thursday. Over 70 rooms had been booked for the night. That clerk left about 10 or 15 minutes after Peggy's arrival. Approximately 12:30, Peggy spoke to the general manager, Betty Pierce. She called her, said everything was fine, not much happening, kind of a quiet night after all the rush of those that had already checked in. At 1:30 to 1:40 a.m., Peggy checked in her last guest. That guest just went to his room, uneventful. And around 2 a.m., there was a young college student from a nearby college, a college called Hyles-Anderson College. It was a fundamental Christian college. That student walked into the lobby, waited at the front desk to get a room. Nobody around. So after about 5 minutes, he left for a neighboring hotel. Now at 5 a.m., Peggy failed to call the manager, Peggy Pierce, at home. See, it was standard practice to get an update, as well as kind of a security check to make sure everything is okay. But Betty, the manager, did not receive the call, so she began to try to reach Peggy in many ways. After trying and failing, then Betty Pierce, she called the Maryville Police Department and reported that there's a problem. When police arrived, they found Peggy's vehicle still in the parking lot. Her keys and purse were behind the front desk. They searched the motel, but they did notice that the cash drawer had been pried open. Money was missing. Now, as they continued to search on the second floor, they entered a vacant wing that was under construction. At the end of the hall, next to the fire exit, unfortunately, they found the nude body of 24-year-old Peggy. She had been raped and shot twice behind the left ear, get this, with a .22 pistol. She had a fresh cut on her shoulder, and her Days Inn uniform was folded and neatly stacked next to her body. $179 had been taken, and police were able to lift fingerprints from the front office and the cash drawer. However, those prints did not match anyone in the police database. Now, there's something even more mysterious about this particular morning and night, and I'm going to tell you all about that in a moment. But we have been, in the past podcasts, been presenting to you wanted people for cybercrime. James Buckland, our producer, gives us people to look for from time to time, and with an audience that reaches around the world, we're hoping to be a part of catching some of these guys. For a short moment, James Buckman is going to share with us who our wanted person is for the week. James, who are we looking for
Henry Hahn,
this week?
James Hahn, Jerry Hahn, and Lin Hahn. He's 42 years old, out of Liaoning, China. He has black hair, brown eyes, and has the occupation of an operations manager for a foreign tobacco company. He speaks both Chinese and English. There is a reward out for this gentleman. The United States Department of State's Transnational Organized Crime Rewards Program is offering a reward of up to $500,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of Han Linlin. Han Linlin has ties and may visit China, United Arab Emirates, and Australia. Han Linlin is a Chinese national who allegedly operated an illicit procurement network for tobacco and other goods on behalf of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, the DPRK. It is alleged that Han worked as the representative for numerous front companies to secure new business lines, directed transshipment of goods destined for the DPRK, and ensured their illicit operations would continue without the interruption despite the efforts of the U.S. and UN to halt trade with North Korea. In March of this year, March 21, 2023, a federal arrest warrant was issued for Han Linlin in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., after he was charged with conspiracy to commit bank fraud, conspiracy to violate and violations of International Emergency Economic Powers Act, North Korean sanctions regulations, conspiracy to launder monetary instruments, and laundering monetary instruments. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact the FBI's toll-free tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI or 1-800-225-5324. You may also contact your local FBI office, the nearest American embassy or consulate, or you may submit a tip online at tips.fbi.gov.
Thank you, James, for sharing that. Now, hang on to your hats, folks. A terrible night into the morning of March the 3rd just turned worse. That's right, 52 miles south on I-65 at another Days Inn. A night auditor was abducted from Remington, Indiana. Her name is Janine Marie Gilbert. Now, Jeannie was described as an outgoing, attractive blonde who, well, a few described as just a little bit different, but she seemed to be always laughing and having fun. She was recently divorced. She was the mother of a 12-year-old guy by the name of Scott, a little guy by the name of Scott, and a 17-year-old young lady, high school senior named Kimberly. Now, she was also preparing herself for a new future, studying business at St. Joseph College. In fact, her daughter Kim had enrolled in a few classes with her, and Kim was set to graduate from high school in just a few months. Now, Jeannie was a bookkeeper for the 76 truck stop off of I-65. She started moonlighting with a second job at the Remington Days Inn. Now, on that evening of March 2nd, there it was also icy and cold with temperatures just under 24 degrees. And one of those crazy things that happens too often in crimes, get this, yep, Jeannie Gilbert was not scheduled to work that night. Did you hear that? Not scheduled to work. She had, in fact, switched shifts with another worker so she could attend the final game that her daughter Kim was a cheerleader in. Now, Jeannie arrived at 11 p.m., and the second clerk there left around midnight. The night was slow, and as she often did, she would spend some time working on her schoolwork. This young lady was doing a whole lot of work, and so in the downtime, she would spend it doing her schoolwork. She did that in a little side office there on the side of the lobby. Now, at 4:30 a.m., Jeannie makes a requested wake-up call for a guest. According to that guest, there was nothing unusual about the call. Sometime later, investigators think that the abductor entered the office while Jeannie was working on her schoolwork. Now, she gets up to go speak with the man who entered the lobby, and they believe that he then took her at gunpoint, controlled her, had her help open the cash register, turns around, locks the lobby door, and then takes her out the steel exterior door to the side office to his vehicle. Now, he leaves that area on I-65, and he exits at the very first exit without the hotel signs that post gas and food. It's a general consensus that the sexual assault and murder of Jeannie, that it really does not occur in the office or the grounds of the motel. It's just after sunrise. Then a farmer makes a call, says that he heard a quick succession of gunshots nearby. He recalled at least 2 gunshots. Then there was a White County bus driver. He said he witnessed a tan-colored recent model Toyota with a window van, and its lights was on and was headed westbound in the area. Another one calls the Indiana State Police, and they report a nude body on County Road 150. And that body was the body of Jeannie Gilbert. Jeannie Gilbert is believed to have been abducted between 4:30 and 5 a.m. from the Remington Days Inn. Her body, by the way, was found 19 miles away near Brookston. Now, the autopsy reveals that she was shot 3 times, again with a .22. She's nude with both her feet still having shoes and socks on. One shot came to the back of her head behind the left ear. The second was right in the shoulder blade. And the third fatal shot entered next to her left breast. That shot went through the lung, pierced her aorta, which is the body's main blood vessel. And she too had been sexually assaulted. And again, DNA was recovered. Now, this occurred about 4 hours later than the killing of Peggy Gill. And you may say, no way the same guy could have done this. But actual DNA does connect these 2 murders together, and it leads us to a suspect. And that same DNA, my friend, connects to 2 other cases where the victim was sexually assaulted and robbed. But those 2 survived, were not killed, all done by the same person. So the question is, my friend, was the same person who did the I-65 killings the same person who did the I-70 killings? Yes, there are similarities. They were shot in the back of the head. A .22 was used in some of these killings, not all of them, but some of these killings. All were females, and the descriptions from the surviving victims of this same person are somewhat similar to the descriptions from witnesses of the I-70 killer. My question to you, though, is this. Is this the same man? Is this the same person? Now, next week, I want to tell you who this person is. We're going to give you more information so that you can decide for yourself. And I'm going to tell you what yours truly, from a retired cop's perspective, I want to tell you what I think about the possibility if this killer is the same person or not. Plus, we're going to tell you about a couple of other crimes on the table that could have been done by the same person. And get this, you're going to hear right straight from the mouth of a person who survived this killer. So tune in next week. But before you leave today, there are some quick lessons. First and foremost, treat your loved ones good always. You never know when they go off to work that it might be the last time you see them. This is so true in these stories that we've shared these 2 weeks. Next, if you do have people that work for you, if you have a business, do what you can to keep them safe. Hire security. Combine that with cameras. Lock doors. It is proven over and over that most of these crimes take place away from security and from cameras. And my friend, if you do work overnight, be alert. Be vigilant. Lots of things happen overnight. And like I say at the close of every one of our podcasts, my friend, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. For the life you save, yep, it may be your very own.